Hello everyone, welcome to another new episode of ESL Talk. We are powering ahead with Season 6, well actually almost at the end of Season 6. We do have one more little surprise up our sleeve and one more episode, so hopefully you can join us for that episode next week. But in this week's episode, we're going to talk about the power and influence of your voice in the teaching environment. So we have our special guest Josh, who is a teacher from the US, currently living in Minsk in Belarus. And he's going to talk to us about how we can use our voice and how we can use it to better teach our students. And we're going to talk about the nuances of voice and the impacts that it can have on teaching. So Josh has a lot of experience in this area. So look forward to that interview with Josh where he can share his insights and his knowledge on this topic. So before we get into today's interview with Josh, just a couple of shout outs and a couple of reminders. First of all, if you're not following us on Instagram, please do give us a follow at ESL Talk Podcast. There you can get upcoming news and find out about our new episodes as they come up, find out a little bit more about our guests as well, and also interact with us on the podcast. And then, of course, you can go to our website, esl-talk.com. Here you can access all our previous episodes for free. And most importantly, you can click the link at the top of the page, be a guest, fill in a few details about yourself, and we'll reach out to you for a future episode, or we can interview you and you can share your passion for whatever it might be, teaching related. We always love to hear from potential new guests and, obviously hear what they have to say and their contribution as well to the community. So please make sure to do that if you haven't already. And just finally, before we get into today's interview with Josh, don't forget our sponsor, ESL-curriculum.com, which is crystal clear ESL, 750 plus and counting interactive lessons, materials, games, and curricula available for you as an online teacher. You can literally just pick a lesson for your level, for whatever it is you're teaching. It's ready to go, it's prepared, it comes with homework tasks, the lessons are interactive. I have personally used them and found them to be amazing. You can get started with an entirely free 2-week trial just by visiting esl-curriculum.com. Check them out and do use them because they're a real lifesaver for us as online teachers. So let's get Josh in for the interview and let's hear about the power and influence of your voice in the teaching environment. Here we go. Alrighty, welcome Josh. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, today we're talking about the power and influence of your voice in the teaching environment. So first of all, Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got involved in teaching and how you first started to understand the influence of voice and how this can help you with your teaching.
Well, I am an American. I was born and raised in Virginia and always desired to be involved with helping people. As I looked and searched of ways that I could be most effective, I found that specifically ESL type ministries, it really gives opportunity to help people who need and want to learn another language and often don't have the opportunity or availability to. As far as how it experienced me as a native English teacher, boy, I tell you, the voice is extremely critical in your speaking. Uh, I went just a few weeks ago and lost my voice, which is something that happens
Oh no,
usually in the fall and once in the spring.
right.
And I'll tell you, it is so critical. You can't teach without a voice. You can't teach without a voice. Your voice is the most critical aspect sometimes. You can use slides, you can do interactions, but if you can't communicate to the listeners and to your students, you're ineffective.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I think your voice, not even just what you say, how you say it, how you use stress, intonation, formality, all those little things that you don't even consciously think about, these can really affect the outcomes for our class and for our students as well. Now, could you share a specific instance where you noticed an impact, of your voice on a student's learning experience? How does this help students, or what have you done in the past specifically about your voice?
For many years, I taught adults, and I taught hundreds and hundreds of adults. But then I started getting involved with teaching some beginners, first graders, second graders, some younger kids, And I really began to realize that my voice is critical. You have to maintain a calm voice. You have to maintain a consistent reaction to things that happen. You're in a group of 6 or 8 second graders. Some of them wanna be there, some of them are there because their parents want them to be there, and different things like that. You have to be a calming presence to them no matter what. You have to be consistent in your reactions to them. Your voice is critical in how they'll respond to you. I remember one student I had in the spring of this year, and he had had issues with many, many other teachers in the past. Of course, only second grade, but he'd been in English from kindergarten and then first grade, and they switched teachers to me in the second half of
Mm-hmm.
his second grade year. And they said he just wasn't responding to his teachers. And so I kinda observed one classroom before he came over with me. Eh, First thing I noticed is he was getting fussed at. You know, he completely shut down the moment the teacher raised their voice. I do not ascribe to the concept or the teaching style of yelling at students. I consider it completely ineffective.
Yes.
If you as soon And so when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, man, I can help this guy. I can help this kid." And when he came to my class, in the first few weeks, he's acting up, but I noticed as we got to know each other, he became a little more comfortable, that he saw I'm not going to raise my voice at him. I'm not gonna yell at him. And he began to pursue himself, trying to make me happy. And that wasn't my goal, but he saw, "Oh, he's not gonna get mad at me." And his voice is going to respond to me in kind words and kind manners and all consistent ways. And it just tremendously impacted his whole learning experience the rest of the spring.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I love that story. It's a nice anecdote, and it goes to show as well, like we want to create a safe environment. We want to create a positive environment where students can learn. Now, in your situation with grade schoolers, like there's gonna be situations where, like you said, students don't want to be there. They want to act up. They want to mess around. Sure. And you can use your voice in effective ways to help control that. But I want you to tell me about some strategies that you can employ to maintain a clear and engaging voice in the classroom. Again, I think engaging is a key word here, and again, what do you do when there are students who maybe are not listening, they're not doing what they're supposed to, and other teachers might shout or raise their voice or get annoyed, but you wouldn't do that. So how would you do this differently?
I really tried to I really tried to connect with each individual student, and it's really critical in the grade school ages that they see me as like a uncle or a grandfather, maybe to some of them, not quite that old. But if I can engage with them and connect with them, and they see that I'm here to help them, I'm here to encourage them, I'm not going to get upset at them. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be their friend. I want to be their biggest cheerleader. Of course, I'd never be a cheerleader, but I want to be their cheerleader. Yeah,
Yeah,
to let
of
them know
course.
they can do anything.
Right.
And
Right.
I've seen students that were about ready to quit English, learning English, and I have one lady as example, 7 years later, she's an English teacher. And the encouragement, I think, is much more effective than any
Mhm.
yelling could ever be.
For sure, for sure. And you have that power to inspire, to change people's perceptions and ideas, not just about your class, but about the language, about the subject. So these are some huge wins that you can definitely do. And like, I think I spoke recently at a university. I was very fortunate to be invited to speak to a group of university students in Mexico. And I was talking to them about the power they have as teachers and the positive changes they can make. And they really understood that. And it's about kind of helping it, like you said, using your voice to guide, to support, to encourage, instead of using it as a
Mhm.
tool for kind of, discipline, which maybe doesn't work well for most students, especially younger ones. It's a bit of an
Yes.
issue. Yeah. So, what about in terms of cultural differences? So, I know you've had a lot of experience across different cultures and backgrounds and diversity in students. So,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
this is something that especially with adults.
Hmm.
I have taught groups of adults where they're from 4 or 5 different countries in the same classroom.
Right.
And I remember one of my first years teaching, internationally, I had a student from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan in the
Hmm.
same classroom, and they both came to my director with the same questions. One of them said, I can't be under Josh's teaching because he doesn't raise his voice enough. He doesn't seem passionate enough about teaching. And
Enough.
to him,
Wow.
passion to him was raising my voice and almost yelling because that was
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
teaching style.
Right.
And then this other lady from Kazakhstan came to the director. I don't know what time it was. He came to me. We had a meeting, and she said,
Sure.
he's getting angry too much. He's raising his voice too much." I was like, "This literally the exact same classroom,
Yeah.
two students from two different parts of the world, and I don't feel like I'm having any differences in any
Sure.
aspect of it."
Sure.
And I asked my director, I said, "Well, what am I doing wrong? What can I do to fix it?" He goes, "You have 18 students that absolutely love the way you're teaching, and you have two of them on opposite ends of the spectrum with these opposite." He said, "I would consider just keep on doing what you're doing." It's like my second semester teaching at his English school. He said,
Okay.
"Just keep doing what you're doing because if you
Hmm.
find that the overwhelming majority are very pleased with what you're doing, then don't change it." He said,
I guess.
"When
Yeah.
just make sure if you're going to interact with the man that he's understanding you. Maybe he needs me to just speak louder
Hmm.
because he's harder of hearing. And with the lady, make sure just be a little bit more soft and learn to adapt as you have the individual students. If you're going to talk or have a small conversation with them, make sure you adapt to them as much as possible. But as a whole,
Hmm.
try to keep it on a middle level."
Right, right. That's a really interesting point there because I think, we're not always aware or even conscious about how we use our voice and how we're perceived by students. So I think this is a really good way of kind of hitting that home. Like, different students from different cultures are going to respond differently. And even the first example you gave about a second grader, like, don't shout at me. You're like, I'm not shouting at you. It's about perception, right? And the way that we
Mhm.
communicate the information. So
Oh my
in what,
goodness,
yeah. So
perception.
go ahead. Yeah, perception. Yeah, I was
Perception
going to
is
say
so important.
it is.
Not
It
just
is.
what you say,
So
but how it's received.
yes, how it's received as well. That's really important. So, in what ways does varying your tone help keep students engaged during lessons? So, how have you managed to do this through your instruction with your tone of voice?
Oh, your tone is you have to adjust it to your age group, but then you also have to adjust it to the time of day. When I'm teaching in the evening and a lot of people are a little bit distracted, I have to make sure my tone is a little bit upbeat, um, and a little bit almost perky, you might say, because I'm trying to keep them engaged in the classroom. Middle of the afternoon, I can just have more of a monotone because the students are there to learn. There's no issues. First thing in the morning, you give me a group of third graders at 9 o'clock in the morning. Boy, I have to be extremely excited. Now, I am not really that kind of person, but I know as a teacher, I have to go into this classroom, I have to be ready, and I have to be that excited person so that when they come to
Right.
see me, they're excited too. Because
Yes.
the students will really mirror my own tone, they'll mirror my own voice, and they'll mirror my own feelings.
100%. Yeah, exactly. You set the tone literally and figuratively. You set the
Yes,
tone for the entire class and for the students. And if you're coming into class at 8 a.m., half asleep, speaking slowly, not really engaged or like even invested in what you're doing, how are the students going to be invested in that? So for sure, it's not about being fake, but it's about how can I communicate this information or this lesson material in the most positive, effective way. And you do that through your tone and through your voice. So yeah, that's 100%
have
true.
to
For sure.
I have to adjust my tone, my voice,
Mhm.
so that they can stay engaged.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to accents, again, a lot of different students from different backgrounds. How do you address those challenges with accents? Because that's going to affect a lot. The way people speak varies. Like we have different phonology, different linguistic features, different mouth sounds, different shapes that we make. So how do you kind of, what challenges have you encountered and how do you kind of resolve those challenges, Josh?
Well, I teaching mostly British English over here in Europe. I get people that say, "Well, that's not how I've heard it said." And I try and encourage them, just because I say it differently doesn't mean
Yeah,
I'm right or that I'm wrong.
right.
And in America, we're kind of have this great sea of English speakers from all over the world. Because of that, we've heard it said a million different ways.
Sure.
And we understand different accents, we understand
Hmm.
where they're from,
Hmm.
But because of that, we've trained our ears. And so I always
Yes.
encourage the students, my voice and my accent might be different. And I
Hmm.
encourage them, listen to other people on YouTube. Get some,
Yes.
yeah, and I got podcasts you can listen to.
Hmm.
There's Instagram channels you can follow that you
Hmm.
can hear different accents, and the more you open yourself up to the different variations, the
Hmm.
the the greater your understanding of the English language is going to be. How do I change myself? Well, I don't sound like I'm from Virginia. If you heard me speaking to some of my family members, you'd say, "You guys aren't even related." They have a
Exactly.
very different. I don't know why. Grew up in
Yeah.
the same area, the same town, the same, even neighbors,
Yep.
but it's just different. It's just
Yeah,
different. And so,
that's I can relate to that 100%, Josh. I mean, for me, like I'm from the UK originally. I've lived in Canada for the last 6, 7 years, and like my accent has just become. And then before that, I was teaching in Korea, so it's like it's just neutralized, and then it's taken a little bit of this, a little bit of that, so it's become something very different. And sometimes
global.
people are like, "Yes, this is what I was gonna say." This connects to this idea of global Englishes. So American accent, British accent, Canadian accent, Australian accent, they're all really useful, powerful tools to help learners to be aware of how we say different things, how how we discuss different things and different vocabulary that we use. We have that kind of that expression where we say potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Like that's kind of a silly example, but it's the crux of what we're trying to say, right? So it's really really poignant. Josh, tell me, how do you adapt your voice to cater to different age groups and proficiency levels? We've touched on this a little bit, but proficiency, age groups, how would we tackle that?
I teach anywhere from beginners of children, beginners of adults, all the way up to English teachers that are not native speakers. Um, Boy, I tell you, you have to speak a lot slower and more clearly, over enunciate to different groups. But if you were to take that same voice and that same tone and use it towards the upper intermediate or the advanced levels, they would think you're crazy. You know, you can speak a little bit more naturally, still not as quickly as you might speak to a native speaker.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I always tell students, I want to speak at a level that you're understanding me, but that for you, maybe it's a little bit challenging, but not
Sure.
hard. Because I want you to leave my classroom a little bit tired. Your brain's a little bit tired. You feel like you've learned something. If I'm speaking below your level, then I've not adapted my voice enough to your age,
Hmm. Hmm.
to your not necessarily even age level as it is your English level.
Yes. Do you
And
consciously plan this or consider this, or is it just something you've learned over time?
yes, I do. One of the hardest things back 5 or 6 years ago, I taught back to back to back adults, three different groups, three different levels: elementary,
Hmm.
intermediate, and
Hmm.
advanced.
Right.
And I had to, you had about 10-minute break between each of the classes, and I had to just kind of get into the mindset again. Okay, this is the group, these are the students. I could, you know, because if I use the bigger words, the more advanced English in the wrong class, it's going to be trouble.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
I'll make sure in that 10 minutes, I'll look over my material again, make sure I've already pre-highlighted things that are stuff I want to focus on, whether it's words to learn or phrases or idioms. And I really try to prepare as much as possible mentally because if I don't, it's all going to go out the window.
That's good to know. I think a lot of teachers might think, or they might say, "Well, I can just slow down." Well, what does slow down actually mean? We need to
Yes.
consciously think about like how
Yes.
we do this and in what ways we do this. So I think that's a really good point, and it ties into this idea of pacing and rhythm. So how have you implemented pacing and rhythm to kind of create a more dynamic teaching environment? How would you use this?
Oh, when I first started teaching, that was one of the hardest things. I had to learn to slow down, to speak more clearly, to speak more effectively, to use words that were going to get the point across in as few words as possible. And I learned in the different levels of the English the rhythm and the flow in which I could use words. And if I said a sentence too fast, two or three words too fast, it could ruin the whole sentence, and the students that they would miss it. So I had to learn to pace my words, intentionally at times giving pauses between the words, intentionally at times giving breaks, making sure they're understanding before I continue.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, but what's the challenge behind that is keeping the rhythm of the sentence, of the paragraph, of the thought
Hmm. Hmm.
also. And so you have to be so self-aware of what you're going to say, and you're so conscious of your students and your environment and who you're
Hmm.
teaching and what you're trying to communicate to them.
Yeah, that's really important. And again, I like that because I think today I was actually working with a student on a presentation that they were doing, and it wasn't just, hey, practice reading. It was, let's stress this word. Let's say this word a little bit more slowly. Let's emphasize this phrase or this quote. So yeah, 100%. It's really key. And these are things that learners don't even realize they need to do. And once you actually make them aware of it, and they're like, oh, I wish I could talk like you, or I wish I could speak like you. I'm like,
Yes.
well, it's about tone and rhythm and pace, and this is pronunciation, and this is how we learn it. So it's a really good insight.
Stressing words really can make an impact.
So important. Yeah, it can totally change the whole message of an idea, for sure, a sentence. What about technology, Josh? Like, now we're living in a time, scary time, an exciting time. We have all these tools. AI is becoming a bit of a bigger role in English teaching. So what are some technologies or tools that you found that help you with communicating your ideas in spoken form?
I definitely use a lot of YouTube.
Yeah, that's a great resource, I think. YouTube, podcasts. Yeah.
Um, Podcasts for the younger learners or for the beginners often are just well above their head. Once they
Right.
hit an intermediate or upper intermediate level, I've got a lot of lists of podcasts. Yours is one of them I'm recommending as well. It's especially as we get into the advanced levels.
Thank you. It's very kind of
There,
you.
we are living in such a great age and environment around this world to learn
Mhm.
languages.
That's
I
true.
don't think we've ever had a greater opportunity. They can go to
Mhm.
YouTube and listen to a native speaker from almost any English speaking country in the world,
Yes.
which is quite amazing, actually.
Even 10 years ago, that was impossible. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Um, and so you got to take advantage of the podcast, the YouTube, um, even just listening to music, whether it's going to be Apple Music, Spotify, Google Music,
Mhm.
and there's a million ways, apps, applications, Babbel,
Yes.
so many other great ways you can learn a language.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think even now with with AI and things as well, like that's gonna make this process even smoother and easier. Like there could be, hopefully, I think it's not too far off where I can go to whatever tool I'm using and type in, you know, tell me a story in this accent, or I want to read, or I want to find out more about this way of speaking, and those tools will exist to help us do that. Another one I really like, Josh, is Youglish. Are you familiar with Youglish?
I've heard of it, yes. I've
So
never
it's a
used
really
it
nice,
personally.
when I've used certain expressions or idioms or collocations where students are like, I don't like, I understand what you're saying, but what do you mean? How do you use it? We can put that into Youglish, and it might find a clip from Friends or Seinfeld, and it'll show it
Oh,
in
that's
real
cool.
time, so you can isolate it in context and be like, that's what it means. And it's not just the phrase; it's the tone, the pitch, the rhythm, right? So
The
and
video, all
sarcasm
that
and
stuff that
yeah,
oh,
exactly,
that's great.
exactly. So it's a great tool as well for everyone. Tell me, Josh, how do you navigate this challenge of having a good presence through your voice? And what advice would you give to teachers who want to communicate more confidently and more powerfully when they're teaching?
Certainly, there's a lot of things you can avoid to make sure your voice stays clean because you don't want to lose your voice. I think you just got to be confident that you can give them the answers, and you have to
Hmm.
be studying your class. You have to be studying
Hmm.
your students, your environment, and knowing what they need and how to effectively communicate it to them. I think so much of teaching is not just in the material, but in knowing the students and knowing
Yeah.
the environment in which you're teaching. Uh, for me, one of the things that really helped me with my voice and with my teaching was learning another language
Yes, 100%.
because
I think it's
I started to
crucial.
realize how I needed to learn and how I understood what the teacher said is not how I understood it at times, or the way they
Yeah.
said it. And so as I did that myself, I realized how I could implement those things into my own teaching as well.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. How can our audience follow you? How can we find out more about you, Josh, if we want to connect with you?
Well, I right now only have Instagram. I have a Instagram English underscore Minsk underscore Josh, and
Perfect.
I've got a few videos and a few posts on there, but most of my students come through word of mouth, offline,
Mm-hmm.
and online in groups. I have a YouTube account, but I don't really use it very much. I use it mostly for reposting good shows and good channels.
Awesome. That's amazing. I will definitely share that in the description. So if you want to connect with Josh on Instagram, I'll put the link below the episode description. That is it for our chat. Thank you so much, Josh, for taking time to speak to us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Alrighty, Josh, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insight on this topic. It was really interesting for me actually to hear about the power of your voice and how it can improve you as a teacher. And I think it's something that is a little bit underrated and not really always considered that much as a teacher because we have so many other things to consider. So thank you for taking the time to teach us and to tell us about your story and your experience and how this has helped you improve as a teacher as well. So before we wrap up, we do have one more episode next week. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram at ESL Talk Podcast. You can also be a guest on a future episode just by going to the website esl-talk.com. And that is it for another week. We are almost at Christmas. We're almost at the end of the year. We've got one more episode to come and it's going to be a doozy. So we will see you very soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great one.